Hi, everybody. We are back. I am Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. I am your host and teacher for this session. We're back to talk about the emotional aspects of caregiving, in particular, the 4 stages of caregiving. These 4 stages are actually stages that I wrote based on my 20 years of experience as a professional caregiver and my personal experience as a family caregiver. Throughout these presentations, you will occasionally see me down here. Know that I am with you. Most of the time, I'll be off camera. It makes the videos and the webinars go faster and smoother. So let's get started. We're going to talk about the usual housekeeping aspects. I'm going to take myself off camera and advance the slides. You should be able to recite this by yourself almost by now because of the repetition. You know that I use the term elderly parent or elderly parents. Substitute that for whoever you are providing care for. The outline for this module is in the course materials. If you have not printed out the slide handouts, stop this video, print them out, come back. Because I put dots in the slides, this helps you follow along with the information that is being presented. Let's talk about objectives for the 4 stages of caregiving. At the end of the 4 stages of caregiving, you should be able to formulate how the care of elderly parents might progress based on your knowledge of health and current needs. You should be able to predict future care needs to minimize unexpected surprises. As caregivers, we do not like surprises. You should also be able to identify the financial, time, and person resources that we have talked that are required to provide care. As you'll notice as we go through these webinars, they build upon each other. Information that I might mention in a previous webinar is followed up in the webinar after that and the webinar after that. The 4 stages of caregiving. The challenges and time commitment of being a caregiver change as caregivers move through the different stages of caregiving. Based on my personal and professional experience, as I mentioned, I developed the 4 stages of caregiving. These are the fledgling, the test run, the mezzo-mezzo, and the home stretch. Let me take you through each stage of caregiving. The first stage of caregiving is the fledgling stage. And this is when caregivers say, I didn't know I was a caregiver. I found myself in this position more than 20 years ago. At the time I was helping my elderly parents, I was in my teens. Nobody talked about caregivers or caregiving back then. It was just something that we did. And through those times, I took my parents to doctor appointments, did a lot of things for them. Caregiving was never discussed 20 years ago. It's still not discussed enough today. Many people who are caregivers who aren't fortunate to be here with us through these programs, they're caregivers and they don't even know it because they'll say, well, I'm just helping out mom or dad, or I'm just doing little things for an aunt or an uncle. Little do they realize how quickly those little things snowball into big things. You know that. We know that. Talking about caregiving is important. If you have people that you know who say, oh, I'm helping out my parents, talk to them and say, you're a caregiver. Caregiver support exists. There is caregiving education out there. It should be our mission as caregivers to spread the word. There are over 40 million caregivers out there who admit they're caregivers. Probably double that who have no idea that they are a caregiver or that help or support exists. Let's talk about the fledgling time commitment. The fledgling stage of caregiving is a stage where caregiving creep occurs. In the fledgling state, caregivers may initially only spend 1 to 2 hours a week with an elderly parent, but the time begins to creep up on us all of a sudden. That 1 to 2 hours a week quickly becomes 4 to 6 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 12 hours a week, and more. When elderly parents are healthy and they need low levels of assistance, the fledgling stage can last for years. This is when caregivers don't recognize their caregivers. But an accident or a change in health that results in needing more help is the change. It's that catalyst that moves caregivers from the fledgling stage to the next stage. Caregiving time, it creeps up on us as caregivers without much notice because the time spent is still pretty enjoyable and low stress. The addition of caregiving hours moves the fledgling caregiver into the second stage of caregiving that I call the test run. The test run is when parents begin to experience physical changes that make them less able to perform activities of daily living. One example, walking up and down the steps to complete laundry. It may be more difficult. Another strenuous activity for an elderly parent may be hauling that heavy trash can out to the curb. You may end up doing that once a week when you visit. Activities previously completed with ease become more difficult because of physical weakness and health problems. That test run stage, it quickly accelerates learning by caregivers. During the test run, household support and help with daily chores begin and accelerate. Assistance with regular or frequent light work of managing a second household, your parents' household, begins. For example, household tasks might include dusting, sweeping, or vacuuming floors, care for pets that might consist of buying dog food or taking pets to the vet, doing laundry and changing bed linens that require physical stamina, bending, lifting, and hand dexterity that your parents no longer have, deep cleaning bathrooms, removing spoiled foods from the refrigerator because your parents aren't noticing them, carrying in items from the grocery store, and preparing meals. All of these happen during the test run stage. Health issues and other considerations increase during the test run stage. The test run supports learning about health issues and early medical decisions, making early medical decisions. At this stage, an elderly parent may be experiencing more physical declines. The presence of chronic disease like high blood pressure, asthma, arthritis, diabetes, or other conditions may result in elderly parents having good and bad days. Chronic conditions in the early stages are not life-threatening. We've talked about this, but they may be problematic and they may advance to more severe conditions. If you see the pink type on this slide, it is about a Caring Generation podcast called Creating Routines to Stay Healthy. It's another module in this program, and it offers a lot of strategies on how to manage health and chronic conditions. The podcast associated with that is called Warning Signs for Caring for Elderly Parents. During this test run stage, you might become involved in picking up medications for elderly parents. You may start to hear about or attend medical appointments. Medical care may start to become routine, and at this point, the health of your elderly parent is probably relatively stable. But quickly, involvement with medical providers happens. As the test run stage progresses, you become more involved. Medical providers like doctors may begin formally calling you the caregiver and expect you to attend all of the appointments. When you attend appointments, you're now providing background information to the doctors or the nurses who help with treatment plans for your parents. You may notice that the test run stage is when you begin taking more time off work to attend routine medical appointments. You begin to learn more about the health and well-being of your parents. You might notice that one or more parents are having more difficulty performing daily activities, or they're just slowing down. This stage offers the most significant opportunity to be proactive in talking about managing health to improve the situation instead of only focusing on an illness becoming worse. Instead of mom or dad accepting that, this is what happens with aging, you and mom and dad can learn to be a proactive participant in medical and healthcare. As the test run stage progresses, you continue to provide help with social visits, companionships, and household chores, all those things you were doing before. You should become more interested in learning strategies to have conversations with elderly parents about care needs so that you can manage expectations and talk to them about things they should be doing to support their health. Managing expectations is so important so that you don't overcommit or overpromise, and so that your elderly parents know what help you can and cannot provide. Caregivers can learn today to take steps to be proactive about health, which is essential. Learn from these experiences of your elderly parents who have health concerns. It can be a very positive aspect for you of being a caregiver so that you can prevent the same concerns with your health and with your family members. Caregivers begin to do more. You've probably already seen this. By now, you may be managing prescription medications. It may be a regular project for you. This includes reordering, picking up, and setting up prescriptions in those easy-to-use medication boxes for parents. You might have already begun taking an active role in grocery shopping and making sure that your parents are eating more healthier meals. The tasks that caregivers perform increasingly relate to managing day-to-day health concerns of elderly parents. For example, a parent who has diabetes, they may have a different need from a parent who has heart disease or arthritis. While there may be similarities in the daily activities, variations exist in medical care, and the use of medical equipment may be involved. You may be using a blood pressure monitor. You may be using blood sugar monitors, helping with diabetes care. These additional tasks and the frequency of your involvement takes you into the third stage of caregiving that I call mezzo-mezzo, meaning half-half or 1 foot in and 1 foot out. The 1 foot in and 1 foot out of mezzo-mezzo comes from two places. One of my favorite clients in the world, loved her to death, was a lady who was from Italy. And she would occasionally sprinkle in these Italian words in her conversation. She was a delight, very active. She would sing Italian songs. And the other comes from an interview that I did with a centenarian, which means a person over 100 years old. This lady's name was Garnet. And I talked to Garnet when she was 104 years old. And Garnet said to me, Pamela, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, meaning she was waiting to pass away, but it wasn't her time. Garnet was a school teacher all of her life. At the age of 65, when she retired, she began hiking the Grand Canyon. She lived in Arizona. And at the age of 65, she was in such good physical condition, she was hiking with 40-year-olds. And I think really, and Garnet would admit to this, that that's what kept her going all of those years. Her peers, her contemporaries, were not 65-year-olds. Her peers, her contemporaries, were 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds who kept her young, and she enjoyed that. And I think it was because she had been a teacher all of her life, so she enjoyed being around younger people. She was very interested in learning about technology and everything that was going on. So the mezzo-mezzo term comes from two experiences. My client who was from Italy, and from Garnet, God bless her, who when I last interviewed her was 104. I'm sure by now the other shoe has dropped and she has passed on, but what a wonderful, wonderful life both of these ladies had. And I was so privileged to be able to care for them and to talk to them. So let's talk about the third stage of caregiving, the mezzo-mezzo, half-half, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. During the mezzo-mezzo stage, caregivers spend more time providing healthcare support. The frequency of medical care and appointments increases. Caregivers help elderly parents to evaluate information and make medical care decisions. The health of a loved one may be up and down. It may change quickly. There may be frequent emergencies. Balancing the independence of the elderly parent and dependence on the caregiver becomes critical in this mezzo-mezzo stage, because maintaining work-life balance for the caregiver is essential. Being too helpful when elderly parents can still manage safely can create greater dependence on the caregiver. Elderly parents can become prematurely dependent on caregivers to provide help and support, and that is not good, because we want our elderly parents to be able to do as much for themselves for as long as possible, because that daily activity is good for them. Because we're in the mezzo-mezzo stage, more workplace conversations about caregiving happens. The mezzo-mezzo stage results in more time balancing caregiving and work responsibilities. You may be coming in late, leaving early, taking half or full days off from work to attend medical appointments or for medical procedures for your elderly parents. Very important. Continue to talk to your workplace supervisor or manager about being a caregiver. You don't have to go into a lot of detail about this. My recommendation is don't spill your guts to your employer about your caregiving responsibilities. Say what you need to say. I'm going to take off Wednesday early because I have a medical appointment to care for my elderly parents. Everything is managed. I want you to know that I have a plan to get my work done. I've talked to my teammates. I am very committed to keeping my job and caring for elderly parents. Your supervisors need that reinforcement. They need to hear from you. They don't need all of the details. Those stay within your family. The caregiving problems stay within your family. You want your work life to appear like you have it under control and you are managing it, because with the knowledge that you gain from this and other programs, you will be able to manage caregiving. You will be able to continue to work and care for elderly parents. As you will experience, caregiving responsibilities and tasks, they'll continue to pose work interruptions in your family relationships, in your personal time, and in your self-care. You as that caregiver, you might feel stretched, stressed, and overwhelmed. At this point, time devoted to caregiving could be 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week. You might even find yourself driving to a parent's home and spending the weekend to provide help because it is just easier to do it that way. Let's talk about the benefit of stabilizing care situations. The goal in the mezzo-mezzo stage of caregiving is to stabilize and maintain. The mezzo-mezzo stage can last for years until there is another change in the health and well-being of elderly parents or a spouse. During this time of stabilizing, there might be family discussions between your siblings about who is available to help care for elderly parents with different tasks. You may have disagreements with your elderly parents because you want to become more involved or take things away from them and they want to remain in control. Remember, the best thing is supporting independence. But on the other hand, you might notice that your elderly parents seem less able to manage daily tasks. Maybe they're more confused. Maybe they're in denial about what it really takes for them to remain independent and to live at home. Your siblings may also be in denial about the situation because they are not as involved as you are, meaning they don't see your parents as frequently or they don't talk to them as frequently. Changes in health might concern you because you're noticing the health of an elderly parent as it's stable, and then as it declines, and then as it stabilizes again. You might be worried that your elderly parents aren't telling you everything. When you call, your parent might say, "Oh, honey, everything's fine." And then when you visit, everything may be in total chaos and may be a disaster. This was my experience when I was a caregiver. When I was 30, I moved away from Omaha, Nebraska to live in California. My parents stayed in Omaha, and I would call and I would say, "Oh, Mom and Dad, how are things?" It would be like, "Oh, honey, things are just wonderful. We're doing just fine." And then I tell you, I would go home for a week. It was like, "Oh my gosh, things are not just fine here." The house is falling apart. All these tasks needed to be done. But you know what they would say? They would say, "Well, honey, we didn't want to worry you." And my response was, I worry more when you tell me that things are okay, because I know that things are not okay. It's time to start having conversations with your elderly parents about the fact that you would rather that they be honest so that you don't have to worry, and so that you can be proactive about stopping a situation that could be going downhill very quickly, and it's going to require more of your time and effort. Why not take preventative action than be in crisis? I think we would all prefer to do that. Let's talk about advocacy. Advocacy begins in the mezzo-mezzo stage. More time advocating for care becomes necessary. Advocacy is a learned skill. It's not something that we are born with. And if estate planning has not been completed, now is the time. If you remember, we talked about estate planning, medical and financial power of attorney, personal rep of the estate, all of that, when we talked about the Eat Cookies video. If you haven't watched that yet, it's 17 minutes. I suggest going back. You can even share it with your elderly parents. It is definitely a conversation starter for the importance of estate planning. Mezzo-mezzo, it's the stage for talking about legal and estate planning. It's essential to make sure that elderly parents and loved ones have completed medical and financial power of attorney documents, a living will, and a will. There is a module in the Caring Generations series called Signs Elderly Parents Need More Care. In there, I do a basic discussion about estate planning. If you become the medical or financial power of attorney, which is abbreviated MDPOA, medical power of attorney, or financial power of attorney, FPOA, you are half-half, or one step in and one step out, of going beyond basic support. You will start taking a more active role in making healthcare decisions and managing daily care for your elderly parents. This is your responsibility as the MDPOA or FPOA. So many children are appointed and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. You want to talk to parents about their wishes and their plans for different types of care. If you haven't talked about money and time, now is the time. Care, financial, people, time discussions must occur. Your elderly parents, they might not want to talk about this. They might be a little uncomfortable. You might want to avoid these discussions. Delaying or avoiding these discussions, I can almost predict, will result in having to make decisions in crisis when a health emergency happens, and that's really not the situation that you want. So do encourage these conversations. Let's talk about caregiving stress. It is significant. The earlier that you talk about caregiver guilt, the better. Caregivers feel guilty about not being able to do more for elderly parents. Elderly parents can make you feel guilty that you're not doing more. It's important to talk about it, especially within your family, so that you feel like you have a sounding board. Caregivers, especially women, they want to do it all. This desire to do it and be everything poses negative care issues. When you become exhausted, stressed, inattentive, or distracted. In the Caring Generation series, we'll continue to talk about ways to manage health and well-being, initiate family discussions, and make plans for care as medical needs advance. Creating a caregiver survival toolkit. I have a podcast on this subject too. Helps manage the stress associated with being a caregiver and trying to maintain that work, life, caregiving, self-care balance that at times honestly can feel impossible. To do this, think about how you managed change or stress in the past. How do you cope with change? Are you the optimist who is action-oriented and you see change as an opportunity? Or are you an idealist who is sensitive to the needs of everybody involved in change? You're a team player, you have very good interpersonal skills. You want to make sure that everybody gets along. Or are you the realist? You're reliable, dependable, you create priorities, checklists, you stick to them. Some people have a little bit of the analyst in them. They may be careful planners who have systematic approaches and processes for everything. Do you look at all the facts? Are you logical, analytical? Are you a problem solver? Or do you have a little bit of all these skills? Know that you already have a toolbox of expertise at your disposal from your work life, from your life experience that you can apply to the roles and responsibilities of being a caregiver. As elderly parents become less able to continue to manage all aspects of care, caregiving responsibilities move into the fourth stage of caregiving, which is the home stretch. In the home stretch, elderly parents or a spouse may need significant care because of health issues or just an ongoing daily need for medical care issues. The caregiver, you might be participating in daily care, showing up at your parents' house every day. If your mom or dad is the caregiver, they could be that full-time 24/7 caregiver. At this time, in-home caregivers and other services may be supplementing the care provided by family caregivers. The home stretch might be the time when more discussions about continuing to stay at home or thinking about moving to a care community can happen. I know you're thinking more discussions. Caregiving is a continual discussion. It's a continual evolution of talking about options for care because things continually change. You know this. And learning how to have emotional and difficult conversations becomes more the norm than not the norm. I want to talk for a minute about talking to parents about moving. Years ago, I had a client, her name was Diane, and I was her medical, financial power of attorney, personal rep of estate. I was everything. She had a sister, but her sister worked and didn't have the time to commit to take care of Diane. And Diane, unfortunately, had memory loss. And for a good bit of time, she was able to stay in home. We had caregivers who went in the morning and the evening, and they cooked meals and helped her take her medications and all of those types of things. But as time went on, Diane became less safe. The caregivers would leave meals out for her, and she would forget to eat them. She would forget to feed the dog and the cat. She would forget that the caregivers were coming in the morning. I would call Diane and say, "Oh, Diane, I'm on my way. I'll be coming." And she'd say, "Oh, I forgot that you were coming today." The beautiful thing in this situation was Diane knew that she had memory loss. So as the memory loss progressed, she wasn't surprised when I said, "Well, we need to get more care, or we have to start looking at this." So when the discussion of moving to a care community came up, Diane really didn't want to leave her home, but she was more receptive and she understood the reasons why, mainly because she was an active participant in the day-to-day that progressed with having caregivers and adding more hours for the caregivers and forgetting that the caregivers were coming and realizing that she was forgetting to eat and all of these things. She came to the realization that it really wasn't safe for her to be living at home anymore. And fortunately, we found a wonderful care community. Her pets were accepted. She was a social butterfly. She made friends. She enjoyed living there. It was a positive change. The more that you involve your parents in discussions about caregiving and in how caregiving can grow and the idea of involving outside services or looking at care communities, the easier these discussions will be for you. Let's talk about daily monitoring and hands-on care. In the home stretch, daily monitoring and hands-on assistance, like this gentleman who is bathing, are a regular part of care. It may be that you're just sitting in the bathroom while mom or dad are taking a bath or showering, or you are actually physically hands-on helping them bathe. In the home stretch, caregivers may be assisting with bathing, dressing, managing incontinence, medication reminding, meal preparation, and other daily tasks. Medical care or oversight may be required to take blood pressure, manage blood sugar, help with insulin, prepare special diets, empty catheter bags, or provide another type of advanced care. In this stage, ongoing contact and coordination with medical providers are necessary. Your elderly parents, they may be in and out of the hospital, or they may have experienced rehabilitation or nursing home stays. If a loved one remains at home, like we discussed, this is the stage when talking about in-home caregivers or moving to a care community should happen, unless the family really is in a position where they can and they want to provide 24-hour care. Care needs will continue to advance, and they may advance to the point that the family caregiver can't emotionally or physically meet the daily demands of care, even with the help of in-home caregivers. If your mom or dad needs lifting assistance, or they're awake all night and you need to sleep to go to work, these are the situations that make it difficult for caregivers to continue. If you already have in-home caregivers, money to pay for that may be an increasing concern if it's reaching the point where it's equal to the cost of an assisted living community. Discussions about backup plans may need to incur, talking about veterans benefits or public programs, end-of-life care are essential during this time. The medical and financial power of attorney, if that's you, you have a much more significant duty and a responsibility to ensure that your parents are receiving the care that they want in the best way possible that manages money, people, time, and efforts. And all of these conversations, they can result in talking about moving to a nursing home if the care needs are substantial, which takes us to the subject of palliative and hospice care. A lot of people don't know what these mean. Palliative care is basically pain control. Hospice care is care in the last 6 months of life. Making heartbreaking decisions to engage palliative and hospice care happen during the home stretch. The wishes of elderly parents should be evident by now in their medical power of attorney documents and living will documents, and in the discussions that they're having with you. Even if you are an adult child or your brothers and sisters disagree, the medical power of attorney has that responsibility to honor the wishes of a parent who wants to avoid extended care. And I want to talk for a minute about the idea of extended care or life support, especially because of the recency of the coronavirus. There are many discussions in families about why aren't there more ventilators? Why isn't there more treatment for older people? And the unfortunate reality of the situation is viruses like the coronavirus, the flu, pneumonia, the norovirus, which is very common in nursing homes. These viruses are very hard on the elderly who have a lot of chronic conditions, heart conditions, diabetes, COPD, arthritis, because their bodies are already at risk. They're fighting to just keep up. They're fighting to stay alive. When someone talks about a ventilator, most people don't know what it is. They think, well, it must be just like an oxygen mask that we put on. It's not. A ventilator breathes for a person when that person cannot breathe. A ventilator is life support, much like a feeding tube or other measures. If you remember David, the 33-year-old who fell over from the retaining wall, paralyzed from the neck down, the only thing keeping David alive was life support. Conversations with your elderly parent about, do you want to be kept alive by a ventilator, by a feeding tube, by other means? If those are the only things that are keeping you alive, Do you want that? The thing that we don't talk about in society and doctors don't like to talk about is they don't like to give bad news, nor do they give or have extended discussions about life support. People who go on life support, especially if they're elderly, more than likely are not going to be better after being placed on life support or after coming off life support. The statistics concern that 50% of elderly adults who are placed on a ventilator pass away within 5 days. If an elderly person comes off a ventilator, the life expectancy in the first year is only 30%. Only 30% of elderly people survive. And those are the people who were in better health before they went on the ventilator. These are discussions that we must have. They're heartbreaking decisions. They're difficult, but have them so that you know the wishes of your elderly parents. So we talked about palliative and hospice care. During the last 6 months of life, you may engage palliative and hospice care. You also want to talk about plans for burial or cremation if they're not previously made. They are a practical component of end-of-life planning. I can tell you that my mom did this, and it was such a relief for us not having to come home and plan a funeral. So let's talk about the summary for the 4 stages of caregiving. As you can see, being a caregiver represents increasingly levels of responsibility. Knowing the stages of caregiving and the associated responsibilities can support talking to your elderly parents, your siblings, about care needs before they happen, and to support better long-term planning. Know that caregiving and change is a process. Give thought to the things that you can control and the things that you can't control. When decisions need to be made and in what timeframes they need to be made so that you are not stressing. While we can view change as a negative, there are so many positives with regard to change. Caregiving gives us skills and opportunities we never imagined. Although, honestly, while we're going through these caregiving changes, it may be difficult on any given day to see any possible positive. This is why humor and laughter are so essential. We'll talk about this in a course section. Caregiving is just a process of change that we all grow through and succeed. I thank you so much for joining me for the 4 stages of caregiving. I'm Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. I will see you in the next webinar.